The corridors of power in Ouagadougou are buzzing with anticipation, and the reverberations are being felt from the boardrooms of Paris to the mining camps of the Sahel. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader, stands at the precipice of what could be his most audacious economic maneuver yet: the complete nationalization of his country's oil sector. This isn't merely another policy shift. This represents a seismic realignment that could fundamentally transform not just Burkina Faso's economic trajectory, but serve as a clarion call for authentic African sovereignty across the continent. To understand the magnitude of this potential decision, we must first grasp the historical context that has shaped Africa's relationship with its natural resources. For over a century, the extraction of African wealth has followed a predictable pattern. Foreign corporations, often backed by their governments, secure favorable concessions through a combination of diplomatic pressure, financial incentives to local elites, and occasionally more coercive measures. The profits flow outward while the environmental degradation and minimal economic benefits remain with the host nations. This extractive paradigm has been particularly pronounced in the Francophone nations of West Africa, where the CFA franc monetary system and a web of bilateral agreements have ensured that former colonial powers maintain disproportionate influence over economic policy. Burkina Faso, despite being one of the world's poorest nations, sits atop significant untapped oil reserves that have long attracted international interest. The question now is whether these resources will continue to follow the traditional extractive model or become instruments of genuine national development under Traoré's leadership. The economic rationale for nationalization is compelling and multifaceted. Currently, Burkina Faso imports virtually all of its refined petroleum products, creating a massive drain on foreign currency reserves and making the country vulnerable to global price volatility. This dependency is particularly acute for a nation already grappling with security challenges and the need to fund comprehensive development programs. By bringing oil extraction and refining under state control, Traoré's government could potentially achieve energy independence, generate substantial revenue for social programs, and create thousands of jobs in sectors ranging from engineering to logistics. But the implications extend far beyond mere economic considerations. Oil nationalization represents a direct challenge to the neo-colonial architecture that has governed African resource extraction since independence. When we examine successful models of resource nationalism, from Norway's Equinor to Saudi Arabia's Aramco, we see that state control of strategic resources can indeed generate prosperity when coupled with effective governance and long-term planning. The key differentiator lies not in the decision to nationalize, but in the implementation and the genuine commitment to using those resources for national development rather than personal enrichment. Traoré's track record since taking power suggests a leader genuinely committed to transforming Burkina Faso's relationship with both its resources and its people. His administration has already taken significant steps to reduce foreign dependency, including pivoting away from traditional Western partners and forging new relationships with countries that offer more equitable terms of engagement. The expulsion of French forces and the termination of military cooperation agreements with former colonial powers demonstrate a willingness to make difficult decisions in pursuit of genuine sovereignty. The regional context makes this potential move even more significant. Across the Sahel, we're witnessing what can only be described as a sovereignty renaissance. In Mali, Niger, and now potentially Burkina Faso, young leaders are rejecting the client-state model that has impoverished their nations while enriching foreign corporations and their local collaborators. This isn't about anti-Western sentiment, it's about pro-African pragmatism. These leaders recognize that true development requires control over strategic resources and the ability to make independent economic decisions. The formation of the alliance of Sahel states between Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso creates unprecedented opportunities for coordinated resource management and economic integration. If Burkina Faso proceeds with oil nationalization, it could serve as a catalyst for similar moves across the region, potentially leading to the creation of an African energy consortium that prioritizes continental development over external extraction. Critics will undoubtedly point to the technical challenges involved in nationalizing a complex industry like oil extraction. They'll argue that Burkina Faso lacks the expertise, technology, and capital required to efficiently manage these operations. These arguments, while not entirely without merit, fundamentally misunderstand the nature of capacity building and technological transfer in the modern era. Countries like China, Russia, and even other African nations like Algeria and Angola have demonstrated sophisticated approaches to technology transfer that prioritize local capacity development over perpetual dependency. Moreover, the assumption that African nations cannot master complex technical operations reflects a form of intellectual neocolonialism that Traoré and his generation of leaders explicitly reject. The continent that gave the world advanced metallurgy, sophisticated mathematical concepts, and complex administrative systems is certainly capable of managing its own natural resources when provided with appropriate support and partnership arrangements. The youth dimension of this potential policy shift cannot be overlooked. Across Burkina Faso, young people represent not just a demographic majority, but the primary constituency driving demands for economic transformation. They've witnessed decades of resource extraction that benefited everyone except their own communities. They understand that true sovereignty requires economic independence, and they're willing to support leaders who demonstrate the courage to pursue it. This generational perspective is crucial because it represents a fundamental shift in African political consciousness. Unlike previous generations that may have been willing to accept gradual reforms within existing systems, today's young Africans are demanding wholesale transformation. They recognize that the old models have failed and that genuine development requires a complete reimagining of Africa's relationship with global economic systems. The international response to potential oil nationalization will likely be swift and multifaceted. Western governments and corporations will deploy their traditional toolkit of diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, and media campaigns designed to portray such moves as economically irrational or politically destabilizing. We've already seen previews of this response in the coverage of recent developments across the Sahel, where legitimate sovereignty movements are consistently framed through the lens of instability rather than self-determination. However, the global energy landscape has shifted dramatically in recent years, creating new opportunities for countries willing to pursue independent policies. The rise of Asian markets, the increasing sophistication of South-South cooperation mechanisms, and the growing recognition that resource-rich nations deserve equitable partnerships all work in favor of countries like Burkina Faso that choose to assert greater control over their natural wealth. The environmental considerations surrounding oil extraction also present both challenges and opportunities for Traoré's government. While fossil fuel development raises legitimate environmental concerns, the reality is that responsible extraction under national control is likely to be more environmentally conscious than operations designed purely to maximize short-term profits for foreign shareholders. National ownership creates incentives for long-term environmental stewardship that pure extraction models often lack. Furthermore, revenues from oil nationalization could fund Burkina Faso's transition to renewable energy sources, creating a pathway towards sustainable development that combines immediate economic benefits with long-term environmental responsibility. This approach recognizes that environmental protection and economic development need not be mutually exclusive when policies are designed with genuine national interest in mind. The potential ripple effects across Africa could be transformational. If Burkina Faso successfully nationalizes its oil sector and demonstrates improved economic outcomes, it could inspire similar moves across the continent. From the oil fields of Chad to the mineral wealth of the Democratic Republic of Congo, African leaders would have a contemporary model of successful resource nationalism to emulate. This domino effect represents perhaps the greatest threat to existing neo-colonial arrangements, which is why we can expect fierce resistance from established interests. The maintenance of resource extraction systems that benefit external actors while impoverishing African populations requires compliant leadership and fragmented continental responses. A successful example of resource nationalism in Burkina Faso could catalyze broader movements toward economic sovereignty across the continent. The media narrative surrounding this potential development will be crucial in shaping both domestic and international perceptions. Western media outlets have consistently portrayed African leaders who challenge extractive arrangements as authoritarian or economically incompetent, regardless of their actual policies or outcomes. This predictable response serves to delegitimize legitimate sovereignty movements and maintain existing power structures. However, the rise of alternative media platforms and direct communication channels allows African leaders to bypass traditional gatekeepers and speak directly to both domestic and global audiences. Traoré's government has already demonstrated sophistication in utilizing these platforms to articulate its vision and counter hostile narratives. This media strategy will be essential in building both domestic support and international understanding for resource nationalization policies. The Pan-African dimension of this potential policy shift deserves special attention. Resource nationalism in individual countries can serve as building blocks for broader continental integration and collective bargaining power. The African Continental Free Trade Area creates new possibilities for intra-African resource sharing and technological cooperation that could support countries pursuing independent resource policies. Imagine a scenario where African countries collectively control their oil, gas, and mineral resources, coordinating production and pricing to maximize continental development rather than external extraction. Such coordination would require the kind of independent economic decision-making that moves like oil nationalization represent. Burkina Faso's potential action could thus serve as a crucial stepping stone toward genuine African economic integration. The timing of this potential move is also strategically significant. Global energy markets remain volatile, creating opportunities for new entrants who can offer stable, long-term partnerships. Asian markets continue to expand their energy needs, often with less political conditionality than traditional Western partners. This environment creates space for countries like Burkina Faso to pursue independent resource policies while maintaining access to international markets. As we consider the implications of Ibrahim Traoré's potential nationalization of Burkina Faso's oil sector, we must recognize that we're witnessing something far more significant than a single policy decision. This represents a fundamental assertion of African agency and a rejection of economic arrangements that have perpetuated poverty amid abundance. Whether this vision becomes reality will depend not only on the courage and wisdom of African leaders, but also on the continued support of African peoples who understand that true sovereignty requires economic independence. The path forward will undoubtedly present challenges. Technical capacity must be developed, international partnerships must be carefully managed, and domestic institutions must be strengthened.